Imagine you're driving home from work after a long day. The sun has just gone down and rain is beginning to fall. As you round a bend in the road, you see someone not dressed for the weather walking on the shoulder. You think about all the times you had to walk to work, wishing someone would offer you a ride. So you slow down and pull up to them. You roll down the window and offer them a ride. Without saying much, they open the back passenger door and get in. They speak under their breath and tell you where they are heading. You try to make small talk but can't get a response from them. After some time of driving, you tell them you're almost there. Still no response. You glance in the rearview mirror and see no one. You feel a sense of panic and dread rush over you. You know something isn't right. The sound of your wheels screeching as your car comes to a halt rings in your ears. You jump out and open the back door. Maybe they're laying on the floor, but there's no one there. Today we take a look at 6 of the most famous legends of a vanishing hitchhiker, and also what is commonly called the oldest. Welcome to Devilishly Strange. Route 66 is probably America's most famous road. In its heyday, it ran from Chicago all the way across the country to Santa Monica, California. It was born shortly after the rise of the automobile, so it should come as no surprise that history and urban legends are plentiful along the route. Our first vanishing hitchhiker story takes place on an old road between Weatherford and El Reno, Oklahoma. Both travelers and locals alike have reported seeing an old hunchback man walking down the highway. The weather is often foggy or rainy, so his outfit of a trench coat and a fedora does not stand out. The Good Samaritans pull over and pick him up. He silently gets into the car. The driver repeatedly asks where he's going but gets no answer. Since the weather is bad, the driver continues down the road. After miles of silence, the old man suddenly reaches for the handle, attempting to open the door to jump out. The driver can't reach him in the back, so they slam on the brakes. They look over their shoulder, expecting to see him climbing out the door. But the door is closed, and no one's there. White Rock Lake is located just outside of Dallas, Texas. It was created in 1911 after White Rock Creek was dammed in order to better provide water to the city. Stories have spread of someone driving along the lake when they come across a woman wearing a 1930s era dress soaking wet. Of course, they pull over to offer her assistance or a ride. She asks to be taken home to Gaston Avenue, just a few miles away. They ride in silence for a few minutes until the driver turns to her in order to attempt conversation. But she's gone. Confused, the driver looks around and reaches out as if they're expecting to feel a person sitting there that they can't see. There is nothing there, so their hand goes straight down to the bottom of the seat. They feel that it's completely soaked through, right where the woman, who looked like she just got out of the water, would have been sitting. Since construction, the lake has become a very popular recreational destination. So typically when this story is told, the woman was a victim of a horrific boating accident that took her life sometime in the 1930s. Our third story is verifiably based on true events. The night before her wedding, 22-year-old Susan Brown was on her way home from her bachelorette party with 2 friends riding with her. She lost control of her Ford Cortina, spinning wildly into a Jaguar that was traveling in the opposite direction. One of her passengers, Patricia Ferguson, died at the scene of the accident. Susan and the other passenger, Judith Lingham, would pass away from their injuries in the following days. Since then, drivers have reported passing the Lower Bell pub on the A229 and seeing a woman dressed in white standing by the road. They pull over and offer her a ride. She accepts, giving the driver an address as she climbs into the back seat. They make small talk as they continue down the road. At some point, the driver asks another question and they get no reply. They glance in the rearview mirror to see no one in the back, only finding a purse lying on the seat. Mary is at the O. Henry Ballroom dancing with her boyfriend one night. At some point, they get into a heated argument, causing Mary to storm out. She begins walking up Archer Avenue. A motorist passing by tragically collides with her but does not stop, leaving her to die. As time passes, her parents expect her to be home and begin to worry. They get into their car and head towards the ballroom. Unfortunately, on their way there, they find Mary lying motionless on the shoulder, dead from her injuries. She is buried in Resurrection Cemetery just outside of Chicago, Illinois. Men report driving on Archer Avenue and passing the former O. Henry Ballroom. They pull over to pick up a young woman with light blonde hair and blue eyes wearing a white formal party dress. She is usually very quiet, so there's little conversation. As they travel down the road, they approach and pass by Resurrection Cemetery, and she disappears from where she was seated. Like the A229 story, this one is also potentially based on a real tragedy. In 1999, author Ursula Bielski claimed the story of Resurrection Mary could be tied to the death of Anna Maria Norkus, who was involved in a car accident in 1927 after leaving from the very same O. Henry Ballroom. On Route 70 in Jamestown, North Carolina, witnesses have reported coming across a young woman wearing a white evening dress on the side of the road. She desperately flails and waves her arms in order to flag them down. They quickly pull over and she quietly gets into the back seat, informing the driver that her name is Lydia. She just left a dance and is trying to get home. She gives the Good Samaritan her address and they drive off. They try to make small talk with her, but her focus seems to be elsewhere, so they drive in silence. Upon reaching her home address, they get out of the car to open the door for her, but they see no one through the back window. Thinking maybe she ran into the house already and they somehow didn't hear it, they decide to knock on the door to ensure that she is safe. A woman answers the door. As the driver explains the situation, her expression changes to a look of sadness. She tells the driver that her daughter's name was indeed Lydia, but she has been dead for years. The final story takes place in what is known as the Bridgewater Triangle. If you want to know more about this haunted and potentially cursed region, check out my full video linked in the description. Instead of seeing a young woman like so many other Vanishing Hitchhiker stories, this time drivers come across a man wearing a red flannel shirt and dirty jeans. He has a large full beard and long red hair, with eerily empty and dark eyes. He holds his thumb out, asking for a ride. Even if there is no one else in the car, he will only ever get into the back seat. They travel down the road for a few miles before the driver begins to hear giggling from behind them. It continues until it reaches a point where the driver threatens to pull over and kick them out if they don't stop. They look into the rearview mirror, expecting an argument or a confrontation, but there's no one there. Their heart drops and they slam on the gas in panic. The radio cuts out and his maniacal laughter begins to come through the car speakers, continuing until they get away from the area. What is often called the very first Vanishing Hitchhiker story dates back to February 1602. 3 men, 2 farmers and a priest, were on their way home from a market in Sweden when a maid asked to ride along with them. Hours later, they stop at an inn to have a meal. The maid orders a beer, but as the keeper pours, it fills with malt grain instead. Confused, he attempts another pour, but this time it fills with acorns. He persists and attempts one final pour. This time, it's blood. Witnesses are horrified. The maid stands and says this year's harvest will be great, but the people will be ravished by war and disease before disappearing into thin air. If you ever find yourself on Archer Avenue in Chicago or Route 44 driving through the Bridgewater Triangle, keep an eye on the side of the road. Maybe you'll be the next person who's lucky or unlucky enough to pick up a vanishing hitchhiker.